Ever wondered why some individuals seem to exist on the periphery of social circles, not out of loneliness, but by design? The conventional narrative tells us that strong social networks equal success and happiness. But psychology reveals a more nuanced story. There exists a group of people whose cognitive and emotional architecture makes traditional friendship dynamics feel forced, exhausting, or simply incompatible with their authentic selves. This isn't a story about social anxiety or introversion, though those traits may intersect. This is about fundamental differences in how certain minds process relationships, authenticity, and emotional labor. Let's explore 5 psychological characteristics that create distance in a world obsessed with constant connection. Imagine walking through every social interaction with a mental recording device running in the background, not by choice, but as a default setting of your consciousness. This is the reality for individuals with heightened metacognitive monitoring, the psychological term for excessive self-observation during social exchanges. These individuals don't just participate in conversations, they simultaneously analyze them. Their minds create a split-screen experience, one side engaging in dialogue, the other evaluating vocal tone, body language, word choice, and potential interpretations. Research in social cognition suggests this stems from an overactive anterior cingulate cortex, the brain region responsible for error detection and conflict monitoring. The paradox? This intense awareness develops from a genuine desire for meaningful connection. These individuals care so deeply about authentic communication that their brains go into overdrive trying to ensure precision and understanding. But this neurological hypervigilance creates an invisible barrier. While others flow naturally through conversations, the hyper-aware person experiences each interaction as a complex puzzle requiring constant analysis. The social cost is significant. People detect something intangible, a hesitation, a measured quality to responses that registers as distance. It's not coldness or disinterest. It's the cognitive load of someone trying too hard to get connection exactly right, only to find that perfection in social dynamics is the enemy of spontaneity. In social psychology, there's a concept called impression management, the conscious or unconscious process through which people attempt to influence others' perceptions of them. Most social bonding relies heavily on this mechanism. People laugh louder at mediocre jokes, express enthusiasm for things they find mundane, and mirror emotions they don't genuinely feel. This isn't malicious, it's social lubrication. But certain individuals possess what researchers call low self-monitoring, a personality trait characterized by minimal adjustment of behavior based on social context. Their emotional expressions align tightly with their internal states. They can't manufacture enthusiasm. They won't participate in performative sympathy. Their compliments, when given, carry weight precisely because they're rare. From their perspective, this is integrity. From the social group's perspective, it often reads as judgment or aloofness. Human beings are remarkably sensitive to incongruence. We notice when someone's not participating in the collective emotional rhythm. When one person refuses to engage in the unspoken performance, it creates tension. The interesting psychological mechanism at play here is that authenticity, when practiced in a culture of social performance, can feel like criticism. When you don't laugh at the forced joke, you're implicitly pointing out that the joke wasn't funny. When you don't engage in gossip, you're highlighting that the conversation lacks substance. Your mere presence becomes a mirror that many find uncomfortable to look into. These individuals aren't trying to be difficult. They've simply reached a cognitive threshold where the dissonance between authentic feeling and social performance has become too uncomfortable to maintain. The price of this alignment between internal truth and external expression? Social isolation. Attachment theory, pioneered by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, teaches us that human connection emerges from vulnerability and interdependence. Friendships deepen when people share struggles, ask for support, and create patterns of mutual reliance. But there exists a personality profile, often developed through early experiences of inconsistent caregiving or repeated disappointments, that evolves toward extreme self-reliance. Clinical psychology identifies this as dismissive attachment style, though that term carries negative connotations that don't fully capture the complexity. These individuals have developed sophisticated internal mechanisms for emotional regulation. When facing challenges, they don't instinctively reach for their phone to call someone. They process internally, analyze systematically, and resolve independently. On the surface, this looks like remarkable strength, and in many contexts, it is. These individuals rarely experience the helplessness that paralyzes others. They've built psychological infrastructure that allows them to weather storms alone. But relationship dynamics operate on reciprocity. When someone consistently demonstrates that they don't need anything from others, an unconscious message is transmitted. You're not necessary. Friendships require a delicate balance of give and take. When one person only gives, or appears to need nothing, the relationship becomes asymmetrical. The other person may admire their self-sufficiency, but will struggle to find their place in that person's life. Over time, they stop trying to offer support, stop checking in, stop extending invitations. Not out of malice, but because they've learned their efforts aren't needed. The lonely, self-sufficient person then faces a confusing reality. They've built an impressive fortress of independence, only to discover it's also become a prison. They don't lack the desire for connection. They lack the practiced vulnerability that connection requires. Social psychology has extensively documented a phenomenon called groupthink, the tendency of cohesive groups to prioritize consensus over critical analysis. Most social bonding occurs through shared perspectives, common interests, and collective agreement. We bond with those who see the world as we do. But certain cognitive profiles are characterized by what researchers call high need for cognition, an intrinsic motivation to engage in effortful thinking and question assumptions. These individuals don't accept popular opinions at face value. They examine trends with skepticism. They notice logical inconsistencies that others overlook. They ask why when everyone else has moved on to what's next. This intellectual independence earns respect in professional or academic contexts. But in social settings, it creates friction. When a group is bonding over enthusiasm for something, a movie, a political figure, a lifestyle trend, the critical thinker who asks probing questions disrupts the collective experience. The group isn't necessarily wrong, and the independent thinker isn't necessarily right. But the psychological dynamic is clear. Social cohesion depends on shared reality. When one person consistently operates from a different framework of analysis, they position themselves outside the circle. These individuals often experience a peculiar social phenomenon. They're respected, but not included. People value their insights in specific contexts, but don't instinctively think of them for social gatherings. Because while everyone appreciates someone who makes them think, most people prefer companions who make them feel. And independent thinkers prioritize intellectual clarity over emotional resonance. The final trait is perhaps the most subtle yet profound: difficulty with emotional reciprocity. This doesn't mean lacking emotions or caring. Rather, it reflects a mismatch between internal emotional experience and external expression. In psychology, there's a condition called alexithymia, difficulty identifying and describing emotions. But even without clinical alexithymia, many people experience what might be called emotional processing lag. They feel deeply, but need time to understand and articulate those feelings. They care profoundly, but express it through actions rather than words. Friendship, however, runs on emotional immediacy. When someone shares excitement, the socially fluent friend matches that energy instantly. When someone expresses pain, the appropriate friend mirrors concern in real time. These rapid emotional exchanges create the feeling of being in sync. People with delayed or action-based emotional expression operate on a different timeline. They receive your excitement and genuinely feel happy for you, but by the time they've processed and prepared an appropriate response, the moment has passed. They care when you're struggling, but they show it by researching solutions or offering practical help rather than emotional mirroring. The result? Others don't feel emotionally held. They might appreciate the practical support, but miss the immediate emotional validation that creates intimacy. Over time, they classify this person as supportive but distant, and naturally gravitate toward friendships that provide the emotional synchronicity they crave. The person with different emotional timing is often bewildered. They know they care. They show up. They help. They remember details. They invest effort. But somehow, people still drift away, reporting that they don't feel close despite evidence of significant investment. These 5 traits, hyper-awareness, authenticity, independence, critical thinking, and emotional processing differences, don't make someone defective. They represent variations in human cognitive and emotional architecture. In different social environments or historical contexts, these same traits might be highly valued rather than isolating. The modern social landscape, with its emphasis on constant connectivity, emotional availability, and group cohesion, creates particular challenges for minds wired this way. These individuals aren't failing at friendship. They're experiencing the friction between their authentic operating system and the dominant social software. Recognition is the first step toward navigation. When you understand that your hyper-awareness makes spontaneity difficult, you can practice structured exercises that reduce metacognitive interference. When you recognize your authentic filter isolates you, you can make informed choices about when to engage that filter and when to relax it slightly. Independence can be maintained while creating small, intentional vulnerabilities. Critical thinking can be balanced with generous participation in others' enthusiasms. Emotional expression can be accelerated through practice and conscious attention. The goal isn't to transform into someone fundamentally different. The goal is to understand your psychological architecture well enough to build bridges between your authentic self and meaningful connection, on your terms, at your pace, with people who value what you genuinely offer. Because ultimately, the question isn't, why don't I have friends? The deeper question is, how do I honor my authentic cognitive and emotional style while creating space for the connection I genuinely want? That question has no universal answer, but it has your answer, waiting to be discovered through self-understanding. The psychology of social distance reveals something essential about human diversity. We're not all wired for connection in the same way. Understanding these 5 traits isn't about fixing yourself. It's about recognizing your pattern so you can navigate social landscapes with intention rather than confusion. Some bridges are worth building, even if they require more engineering than others find necessary. The question is, which connections matter enough to you to make that effort? and which solitudes are worth protecting.